why don't we go ahead and get started? That'll give us as much time as possible for Dr. Waters to present. I would like to welcome you all here for our Dean's lecture here today. Before I introduce Dr. Waters, let me quickly blurb our next lecture, which is Tuesday. The Chang lecture is going to be Joseph Finns is going to be presenting on neuroethics and disorders of consciousness, and that will be in Kornhauser Library Auditorium. So do please come as well for the Samuel Chang lecture on next Tuesday at noon to 1. But today, I am very pleased to introduce David Waters, who is Director of Curriculum and Outpatient Therapy and Legal Therapist in Charlottesville, Virginia. And I'm talking on attachment, compassion, and connection. I think his bona fides are already covered, so why don't we just let him get to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve. Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you for coming. It's this is a favorite topic of mine. I was in the Department of Family Medicine at the University of Virginia for 37 years. Started in 1975, and I was one of the first psychologists in family medicine. It was a very early.
This one, I think.
No, this one needs to hit its own. It's this one that needs to be.
That's one.
There we go. Family medicine very early on mandated the inclusion of mental health training, counseling, that kind of stuff. And I was one of the first people to be put in a job like that and had to figure out how to do it. And as a result, it's been a long, strong interest for me, and it remains so. Even though I'm now retired, I retired from the university in 2008, and I practice as a therapist downtown in Charlottesville. But I'm always happy to talk about this because, in my view, the doctor-patient relationship is a sacred resource. It is an extremely powerful, important element of everything we do, and it deserves a lot of attention. And one of the problems we have these days is that it's not sexy. It's not making technological improvements. It's not. We don't have apps for it. You know, we don't have ways to bring it out as a crucial thing. It becomes deep background, and everybody's interested in, focused ultrasound or a new drug that might change the field or whatever. I try to beat the drum for this any chance I get and as well as I can. And it's delightful for me to be here in the Dean's lectures where there's really serious attention paid to this aspect of medical care. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide some context first about the idea of relationships, the power and the importance of relationships of all kinds. And then I'm going to suggest some guidelines, some ways of thinking about them, some rules of thumb that relate to the doctor-patient scenario and that can be relevant to what happens in the clinical encounter. So let's start with a question. Is a doctor more like a priest or more like a mechanic? Now, time and everything else rules against me breaking you up into small groups and then we come back together and share what we've learned. So I'll tell you what your small group would have come up with. Your small group would have gone fairly quickly to the idea of we're mechanics. We fix things. People come in with dents and bumps and axles that don't turn, and we oil and grease them and replace them as needed, and we're back and set them back on the road. But then after a few minutes, somebody says, wait, there's a problem with that. The car doesn't care if it gets better. The mechanic is working on an inert creature that if he does it badly or wrong or not at all, just sits there. And that's not our case. Our situation is profoundly and deeply a two-way street. And so the mechanic analogy doesn't work. So we get pushed back towards the priest end of the thing, if we think of it as a continuum, back towards that, the power, the importance of what happens between the two people. And that's always where I like to be pushed, because I don't think, I mean, you are not mechanics, you never will be mechanics. You have the skills that good mechanics have, but they come in a totally different context. For example, the main thing is replaceability. You mess up a car, you can get a new one. You mess up badly enough on a body, you can't. So the art and science piece is very interesting, because the science of medicine is about how all people are alike, and the art of medicine is about how all people are different. So what's interesting about that is, in the end, the science is easier. It's not that it's not complicated, that it's not difficult, that it doesn't take a long time to learn, but it follows the rules. It obeys principles. It can be counted on. It can be quantified. When it changes, when we realize, oh wait, it doesn't work that way, it works this way, everybody gets the news at once, and everybody tries to enact that. Well, not quite at once, it takes years, but you know, ideas sift through. But they are ideas that everybody can lean on in the same way. And there is something comforting about the dependability about that, about the fact that we can know our science, we can debate it until we get it right, and then we have it. The art and individuality of patients is much messier, more confusing, more undependable, and I would say in many ways more vital. I've heard a lot of docs say, and I worked, as I say, at UVA for a long time, and I went through people's careers with them. I was involved with doctors over a very long period of time, and many of them would say the science itself actually gets to be not very interesting after a while, much less interesting. The interest gets to be, the older I get, a couple of people said this to me, the older I get, the more interested I am in how the science fits this person, how I communicate the science to this person, how I can be with somebody in a powerful way that is built on, or is built up from and helped by the science. But I find the science less interesting over time. So medicine has this dirty secret, as I like to call it. And the dirty secret is that a huge amount of medicine is about psychology. I used to do this experiment where when I was teaching the residents about this, it happened by chance one time. A guy stuck his head in the room to say, is this where the so-and-so is? And I said, no, it's not, but would you come in a minute? I have a question for you. He was a little shocked. But then I realized that when I was teaching the residents about this, I could step out into the hall and catch a white coat going by, and I knew most of them, or half of them, I would say, probably in the big hospital. But whether I knew them or not, I would say, may I have 10 seconds of your time to teach the residents something? They would say, yeah, what? You know, and I would pull them in and say to them in front of the residents, what part of medicine is really about psychology and about the behavior of the patient, the relationship with the patient, et cetera. And the numbers were dependably between 30 and 90%. I mean, nobody ever said, that stuff doesn't matter. That's, you know, 10%, 5%, I don't know. I suppose you have to remember their name, but after that, it's all said. They don't say that. They say those numbers are very high. And so it raises the interesting question of, why don't we teach doctors more psychology? Because if we're putting them into a psychologically rich, intense, and fairly demanding situation without much background, why aren't we covering that? And I think there's three good reasons, and they are good reasons. I'm not putting them up as straw men. One is, it takes a lot of time. It's just, you know, you can barely squeeze enough science into 4 years of medical school to be ready to go out and commit medicine on people as a resident. And so we couldn't add something that large without changing the curriculum. Second reason is, psychology doesn't kill anybody. I mean, short of suicide, we don't, you know, as one of my skeptical doctor friends used to say, you guys don't kill anybody and you don't cure anybody. You're like the damn ophthalmologists, you know. It wasn't ophthalmologists, it was dermatologists. You're like the damn dermatologist. You don't kill anybody and you don't cure anybody. But it is true, and it means that we don't have to cover it in order to be doing the job well, at least at a certain level. And the third is that docs are generally reasonably good psychologists by assumption. Over time, you learn a certain amount of psychology. You get some coaching, you get some lectures and help, but you learn. You know, I know now not to ask her a direct question. She gets defensive and balky if I ask her a direct question. She's kind of a touchy, sensitive person. I have to approach her quite gently. I think she must have had a very tough childhood or a very mean mother. I mean, you get reasonably sophisticated, good psychology out of docs. They're smart, they're interested, they see a ton of people, and so you manage. But that leaves us somewhat unprepared with this messy entity called the doctor-patient relationship, which can be great and can be painful. And it's quite a challenge because it is largely under the it's vital to the process of healing, certainly. It's both physical and emotional. It has a tremendous amount to do with people getting better, feeling better. I'm not going to try to prove that today, but I know that you can believe that. It is largely the responsibility of the doctor, whether he or she wants it or not, because as the more important the home team is, the person on whose turf this happens, you have more control. And patients need us more than we need them in the end. There's always more of them. There's not always more of us. And they need us to like them and to feel concerned and caring about them, so they're watching us carefully to see, how am I doing? Does he like me? Does she think I'm a hypochondriac? Does he believe that I can get better, or is he giving me a load of hooey? But they are watching us very closely. They don't have a big say in how the relationship goes. We have more say, but believe me, patients are always trying to influence it. The relationship's very important to them, and they usually try to influence it somewhat indirectly. It's better to do it directly if you can do that. It is often the source of the success or failure of the encounter. You can have a scientifically very successful encounter with somebody and come away feeling terrible. You can give them really good ideas and have them basically bat those ideas down in a way that you don't understand. You came with this problem, I'm telling you what to do with this problem, and you're snarling at me. What happened here? What went wrong? It can be very difficult. And it doesn't get taught or supported much for a couple of reasons. It's hard to teach the doctor-patient relationship without being in the room, which I was off and on, always with our residents. I always went along, disguised myself as another doctor, and just sort of stayed in and watched, especially when people had particularly difficult patients. They could say, will you see Mrs. McGillicuddy with me? She drives me crazy. I don't think I'm doing a good job with her. And we would do that. But that's labor-intensive and difficult. Short of that, there's infinite variations. It's hard to know what happened. The doctor doesn't know what went wrong. He saw what he saw, or she did, and they come out and say, I said it in a nice way. Or I thought I asked her a couple of very good questions, and she got huffy and defensive with me. I don't know what went wrong, and they don't. And I can ask them 10 ways from Sunday. They're not going to know more because they saw what they saw, and they experienced themselves and the other person the way they did. And it can be very hard for docs to do that because of they want very much for it to go well, for it to be a successful encounter, and so to bring it to me and say, where did I go wrong, and really listen and really try to make adjustments, it takes some courage and some forbearance. So now what I want to do is I want to take a jump here into attachment theory, which is, I'm going to do a very, very short shrift on it. It's not terribly complicated. You guys could get the hang of it in a 15 minute or half-hour lecture, get the general gist of it. I'm going to give you the very central gist. But it's a very, very core concept in a lot of psychotherapy these days, and in a lot of rethinking of what is happening for people relationally, in relationships. It's a very important concept. And it's all about how people relate, the patterns of interaction that are based mostly on early learning, on what it is that people need to relate well, and how that gets developed, and how the dyadic process, what happens between any two people, informs our behavior all of our lives, all the way along. Let me, I'm getting confused by my own cards here. Okay. So for our purposes, what's important here is the relationship between the attachment figure, so-called, usually a parent, and I'm going to start with parents because many of you have that, well, everybody has that experience from one end or the other, and some of us from both. All of us have been children. Many of us have been parents. All of us have observed the parenting process, so it's a very good place to start. I will deal with the question of are we parents to our patients? The answer already is no, but let me start with the idea that let's look at the process of attachment as it happens between parent and child and then extrapolate from there. The main thing that is important, the main thing we are trying to teach our children in the process of attachment is that they are safe with us, that the relationship between them and us, the dyadic relationship between them and us, is safe, is dependable, unthreatening. It is safe for them to need help. It is safe for them to be scared or sad or mad. It is safe to be hurt. They can ask us for anything. We don't necessarily give it, but it's okay to ask us. A whole array of ways in which it's safe, dependable in the form of being consistent and available. When you need me, I will try to be there. If I can't be there, I will make sure someone else is. There will be someone there that you can get help from. Helpful by reading the needs of the child. One of the main things that parents do, and do well for the most part, is they get to read their child well. Parents who don't read their child well create a lot of trouble for themselves and their child. And it happens. I've seen parents who are just dyslexic for their own child. Why is she like that? She looks very scared to me. She's not scared. She's being a pain. She's trying to make me mad. And I'm thinking, whoa, she's really not. I promise you she's not, but you got to find a good way to say that. But by reading the child and helping the child to focus on how to manage, how to be part of this relationship in a good way. I mean, really, the crux of attachment is we are teaching kids from day one how to be in relationship with other people, because that's the main thing that happens in the world. And the connected part is that we are clearly caring for them, we are tuned in, we are able to pick up their rhythm. Again, a huge parental skill. Parents who can pick up their rhythm, who know when a child is tired and don't push for things. We've all had the painful thing of being with a parent and child and having the parent try to goad the child to do something cute. Show him what you learned today. Show him what you learned today. No, I don't want to. Show him. Come on. This is really cute. Wait. Watch this. Show him. And you're thinking, oh my God, this is a car wreck. Right? This is the parent is not at all in tune with the child, and they're trying to squeeze something out of the child that the child doesn't want to or can't give it that. But that connected feeling, the sense that somebody gets me, is very important. One of the most important single things that happens, maybe the most important single thing that happens in the attachment process, is the co-regulation of affect or emotion, same thing, in which we, from very early on, we need to teach our children how to cope with emotion. Let's remember, you all know it, let's say it together. Emotion is where all the trouble comes from, folks, okay? Why are there so many therapists in the world? Because we're smart, we're capable, and when we run into our emotions, it's sometimes a mess. We don't know how to cope with them, we don't know how to handle them, how to deal with them very well. And so one of the main things we do with our children is to teach them that a very major part of what I do with you is I help you when you're having a hard time. I help you make sense of what's happening to you. I help you ride it out. I let you know I will go through it with you. I teach you to recognize your emotions. You're really mad at mommy, aren't you? Yes, I hate you. You really hate me right now. You're so mad you can't have a cookie. I understand that. It's okay. You can be mad, but you're not going to get a cookie, etc. But that to work them patiently through that process of how badly they feel, how much is flooding them, because emotions do kind of flood us. But they learn that they are with someone who can contain their emotions without getting reactive and fighting back in kind. I'm sick of hearing how much you want a cookie. Just shut the hell up. Not good parenting. Whoops. Talk to me later. But we teach our children that our emotions are natural, important, manageable, difficult, and that we'll get through this okay. And that is a two-person task. That is one of the prime tasks of dyadic interaction, is that learning. That's what makes for good marriages to a large extent. Any marriage does okay, most marriages do okay, when one person is inflamed and the other has their feet on the ground. Or vice versa. The first person has her feet on the ground and he's inflamed now. When you both get inflamed, or if one person inflamed draws the other into the flames very quickly, that's how I stay in business. I should not want it to go away, but I do. There's no danger of it going away. The management of strong feeling between people at the marriage level, at the marital level, is a real challenge. So now what I want to show you right now is there's one more hidden thing here. Yes, the attachment is built on the mutuality. It's not a symmetrical relationship. We're in charge. We have to be careful for the child. We have to provide the safety and the help and the co-regulation of affect. But it is a very mutual relationship. We affect them, they affect us. We affect them, they affect us. I'll tell you just very briefly a wonderful study that was done a few years ago. We all know the old experience. We all had the experience. If you hand a baby to its mother, the mother is apt to take it and calm it and swaddle it and swing it like this. If you hand it to the father, he's apt to do this, right? So somebody said, how does that get started? Why is that? And when they looked at it very closely, they figured out that very, very early, when you hand the baby to the father, the baby goes, throw me, throw me. Let's do that thing. You know, if a baby screams and cries, fathers are usually smart enough not to do it anymore. But the baby is asking for it. And so the baby induces it some. Anyway, this mutuality, the mutuality is very intense. It's nicely shown in this next video, which I think I can make work here like this. Okay, good. Sound? Do we have sound?
Devised what they call the still face experiment to see what happens when interactions are disrupted. We asked the father of 3-month-old Stefan to avoid his son's efforts to make contact. When the child can't get a response, he becomes anxious, remote. It took only a few seconds to cause buoyant, happy Stefan to become sad and dejected. Imagine the unending distress of a child who rarely or never experiences intimate interactions. It can be a father, it can be a mother, it can be a combination of the two, or someone else entirely. But the child needs those interactions almost as much as he needs the air he breathes.
Isn't that lovely? I love that. So there's a bunch of these. This experiment was done many, many times to study it very closely. And you see over and over, I had to choose one. I probably for personal reasons decided to bring a father, but you see over and over again the baby kind of sink down and kind of go into, you know, a kind of a sad, quiet mode. And then in some of them, the baby will give it the old college try. You still out there? And the person is doing what the researcher asked them to do. Don't respond. Some people just look at the baby and never move their face. Same thing. It's not just that the father looks down. The maintains eye contact, but with absolutely no expression. The baby will make a couple of tries and then just kind of fall over to the side. That's at 3 months. That's at 3 months. That tells you very strongly we are wired for connection. We are wired for connection. If you remember one thing from this talk, that would be the one I would have you remember. That that is a neurological event. That is hardwired. It is in there. It is eager to come out. It is looking to, we are looking to make contact. We are looking for the response we get. We are looking for how we manage things together. Our brains are actively affecting each other in important ways. There's a whole emerging field called interpersonal neurobiology. Dan Siegel, S-E-G-A-L, is the main person in it, who is actually mapping the neurological events that happen in close interaction. Parent and child, husband and wife, mother and teenager, father and teenager. What happens neurologically? It's a very interesting business. So the more we know about this process, the better, because the doctor-patient relationship is a very particular, very important version of this. Does that mean that we are parental or attachment figures for our patients, so that we are required to care for them in that way? Certainly not parental figures. They don't want us as parents. We don't want to be their parents. We can't be. We don't have that kind of responsibility or want it. But attachment figures is much stronger, because attachment figures are, in general, people who are older. Not always true with a doctor, but that's an exception. Wiser, have some control of the environment and some ability to help. I mean, this is, again, hardwired. If I'm in the presence of somebody who can make my world work in the next little bit or not, I am really, really attending to what's happening to them. Really attending to it. Excuse me. We are looking to people whose support and goodwill we need for our own survival or safety. That is a definition of the doctor-patient relationship to some extent. This person can make a huge difference in my life. I need them to play with me. I need them to smile at me. I need them to engage with me in a positive kind of a way. And the more crucial any encounter is to our emotional or physical survival, the more important that relationship becomes. Now, this is a blend, if you will, of opportunity and burden, because it does mean that the dyadic events of a doctor-patient relationship have a lot of impact, which means that it's not just you're in there to inform them or whatever, but it also means that you have a huge tool available to you to have an impact beyond science and beyond that you can work to keep the relationship a successful dyadic event in which people can feel safe, can process their emotions, can feel not alone. The feeling of being not alone is a tremendously important feeling to our species. So I can't relieve the burden, but I can help with the opportunity, and hopefully without just saying you got to take more time, you're not a therapist for them. That's not what you signed up for. But you can be enormously therapeutic in small ways, in lots of different small ways, that don't just build a good relationship with them, but also teach them and yourself something really positive and useful about good relationships. So what I have done is I have put together a few ideas that I gleaned for myself, invented for the most part, but maybe repackaged. I forget now. Once you forget, then you can claim it as your own, right? We all know. The first time you do it, you say, well, as Bill always says. The second time you say, it occurred to me the other day. And the third time you say, as I've said for years. So these are all under the I've said for years category, and I don't know. Let me remind you of the bottom line there. You do this overall pretty well, more than you know. It's going on a lot. One of the things a lot of times with residents, for example, I have the sense not that I'm teaching them, but that I'm helping them notice what they do that works. And can say to them, why do you think she responded so well to that? I don't know. Good mood? You know? Well, I don't know. Oh boy, there's a lot there. You don't know what a good job you did there, or what a difference it made to her when you asked that question, or when you got it wrong and she said, no, that's not it, and you didn't respond defensively. You said, oh, okay, that's helpful. Tell me what it is. They often don't know what they're doing well. But what I've tried to do is to package these a little bit, but just in some somewhat memorable ways. The first one is not of my own creation, as you might guess, the 3 words of the Hippocratic Oath we all know. But to think about how do we not, first do no harm is a wonderful expression. One of the reasons everybody knows these 3 words is that it's such a brilliant idea. At the very least, don't make things worse. That works everywhere in town, okay? Any aspect of that, from coming home and finding your partner in a bad mood, to having strange noises come out of your car, to anything. First do no harm is always a good backup. So what equals harm in relationship terms? Well, in general, if you think back to Stefan and his father, you think about the break, the disruption of the relationship. Anything that constitutes a real disruption, a real break in a relationship, and a breakdown in the communication and in the exchange is problematical. So a misunderstanding, inattention, one of the things that happens with residents, especially these days with computer keyboards in rooms and everything's being managed on the computer keyboard at the same time. I think this is a difficult technology to handle. I don't think we have it right yet. I've never seen it done very well. I've seen better and worse versions. But very often residents have their head in the computer and the patient is saying something they've been rehearsing for days. I got to tell her, I got to try to explain this. And so she, the resident, is sitting there kind of putting in some data and looking back and seeing what meds is she on and how long since she's been seen and whose patient is she, and the patient is saying something vitally important to her and suddenly realizes she's not getting this or she's getting 1/10 of it. Very hard, very disheartening. Oh my God, do I say it again and start over? Is this what she wants to hear? Will she ask me the right questions? So noticing those, noticing when there is, I think, for example, in that one, saying, excuse me a second, I need to interact with the computer for a bit and just get up to speed before I find out what's exactly happening for you today, okay? Or if it happens the other way and you realize she's been talking at you over your shoulder and you didn't get it, don't fake it, don't pretend you got it. Say, I'm sorry, I was lost in the computer. I think what you've been saying is probably very important. Please tell me again. That's repair. Repair, by the way, we saw repair in the video. The process of repair is crucial to all relationships. All relationships proceed by a process of disruption and repair. Disruption and repair. Disruption and repair. That's marriages that work get very good at that. We have a fight. We learn how to come back together and work it out. We make sense of it. We get it. We get to feeling better. So that process of disruption and repair is very important. But whether you miss an emotional cue or you say something that is off because you didn't understand or you weren't listening or whatever, you can always repair it. You can always go back to it. If you're paying attention to the patient, you will notice the disruption. The patient will alert you to the disruption, and it will be very useful. And you can go there. Strong miscommunications with different understandings, strong emotional cues. It's never unrepairable, and you should never be afraid to go to the process of repair. So let me say a word about attachment generally and doctoring as well. In the attachment field, the people who study attachment are very careful, and they really mean it, to say over and over again, the goal in attachment to a child is good enough attachment, good enough mothering, good enough fathering. Don't try to be perfect. Don't worry about being perfect. You can't be perfect. That's not the goal. Kids are resilient. They will know your intent. It only has to be good enough. The same is true with doctors and patients. It's not that if you make a mistake, it's terrible, you've messed everything up, you're not a good doctor. It's you want to keep trying to do a good enough job and to be able to go back to them and stay with them in a way that says, you are my full priority right now, and I want to make sure that I get what you're saying and you get what I'm saying, and we're working together. That involves understanding and respecting the power of your presence and your attention and your empathy and understanding. Docs don't know how powerful a tool it is, because none of us, well, not very many of us, I suppose there's a few, but very few people grow up with that experience. Okay, I suppose we have all seen the the person who was always the president of the class, and everybody sort of rotated around him and her and always had a sense of, you know, I'm really important here. In general, it's a novel thing, especially for young residents, to really understand how important their part in it is. It's a little bit like a parent, if I may stretch that analogy again, a little bit like a parent who sort of assumes, the kid, he's not particularly interested in me. He's not paying attention to me. He just wants a cookie. Well, he wants a cookie, but he damned well is tuned into you and paying attention to you. You are very important in that. And to learn that, and not in an arrogant way, not in a I'm important, I'm more important than you, I'm better than you, but in a way that says, what I have to offer here is extremely important, I want to do it well, is very, very important. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. The idea of this, the importance of this has to do with the limits of data and facts to change people, okay? Technology rushes forward, tons of stuff that we can do more, better than we used to be able to, etc. We can bring fabulous things to bear on people, for people, and not have them have any impact at all. They need to see it in the context of a relationship of someone who is in sync with them, who is talking to them about them, as opposed to, here's what we do. I used to outlaw our residents saying, what I always tell people is, no, don't bring the whole world into that consulting room. That's you and her. That's you and him. Say, what I want you to understand that's really important is, and then, okay, maybe you do always say it. But don't say, I always tell people, because that says, this is boilerplate. Everybody gets this. You're nobody special. No, that person is very special at that moment. And that process of them knowing that and trusting you, that you are broadcasting and receiving in that spirit, is really, really important. And so we know this at some level, but we often resort to giving the data because it's easier to give the data than it is to focus on how am I doing with you? Are you getting this from me? What are you hearing? Technology and our ability to cure will continue to grow, but a lot of it will be wasted if we don't provide the human context that says to the person, hey, this is a tool I have, but the most important thing is how that tool fits you. Here's why I think it fits you well. Here's why I want to have you think about it with me. Very different experience. Your caring is key to that. Asking the right question does not make you responsible for providing the right answer. Now, in medicine, in general, this is not true, okay? In general, in medicine, if you ask a question, you are responsible for making use of that answer. If you're examining a knee and you say to somebody, have you had any trouble with sodium intake? And you report that to your preceptor, they're going to say, what are you doing? Why are you asking that? What does sodium intake have to do with the knee? I don't know, I was just curious. No, you only ask questions that you need the answer to. But in my area, in the personal area, in the area of the art of the individuality of patients, asking the right question does not make you responsible for providing the right answer and shouldn't stop you from asking the question. Here's an example. A resident came to me some years ago and was very agitated from an encounter, and I was precepting, and I said, this really bothered you, and what is it? And he said, I think she's either being threatened or beaten up by her boyfriend. I know him, I don't like him, he's a scumbag as far as I'm concerned. But she is really rattled, and I think it's got to be that. And I said, did you ask her about it? And he said, oh, no, I didn't ask her. I don't know what to do about spouse abuse. I don't know what to do about domestic violence. I'm not asking that question. And I said to him, all together now, asking the right question, etc. So it's very important, because in a good relationship, staying with what is real, staying with what is happening now, is extremely important and makes a big difference, even though I can't actually solve it. We can't solve a lot of things in my field. We have to get used to that. You guys can't solve a lot of things too, but you solve more than we do. And your solutions are cleaner and clearer often. If we treat the hyponatremia, this will happen. We don't have that luxury. We're working with a much fuzzier palette. But the idea that that I can I can ask the question even if I can't use the answer to solve the problem is very helpful, because that says to the person, I'm with you, I get what's happening, now we have to figure out what we can and can't do about this. But people get over-responsible and over-tuned to the idea that, that they have to be able to solve it in order to bring it up. So if someone says to you, I'm scared, there's another derivation from an example from my work. If somebody says to you, an older woman said to one of the residents, I'm so scared and so anxious about my husband's illness that I think I'm going to go crazy. I really feel like I'm going to go crazy. And he went into a kind of a, there, it'll be okay, don't worry. We'll get through this, we'll be okay. You know, lots of people come out of this, we can treat it, da, da, da. And he said, I was aware when I was doing it that I was just avoiding the thing. I didn't know how to deal with that. And we talked about that he would like, in another example, he would like to be able to say to her, tell me how scared you get. Tell me what it looks like when you feel like you're going crazy. Because that says to somebody, that is the co-regulation of affect, okay? That says to somebody, I'm with you in this, we can figure it out, and I'm not afraid to know what's real for you. I'm not afraid to know what's real for you. Very important piece, and a very, very helpful connection with the patient. When in doubt, tell the truth. Lots of relationships, doctor-patient relationships, but personal relationships as well. Lots of relationships founder on politeness and circumspection and avoidance of difficult issues. And it often, in medical care, it very often gets you into deep water where you're not really talking to the person about what's real and what's going on. You're not really relating to them very well. The confusion and the circumspection tends to metastasize quickly and just create a kind of disruption of its own. And I learned to recognize that pretty well. And I would say to residents, if you're getting lost and confused with a patient or dreading seeing them, it suggests that there is something dishonest happening in the relationship. You're not making a good, strong, honest connection with them. And very often, honesty itself was much at issue. And so let's talk about that, because there's a nice way to say anything, and the possibility that you can resolve, that you can make a very different relationship out of it, make it work much better, is very prominent. I had a resident that was very frustrated and came to see me about seeing a woman, middle-aged woman, 55, who he said, I dread seeing her. I know she's not taking her meds because of the measures I can take, but she tells me she is. I don't think she takes any of my advice, but she nods and sort of accepts it. And it's just very frustrating. And I just kind of want to say to her, damn it, get going here or get out. And I know that's not a good thing to do. So I said to him, I helped him evolve a piece that he went back to her with, which was to say something like, I feel like we're not working together very well. I'm pretty sure you're not taking the meds and don't want to tell me about that. I think you don't trust me much, and I think in some way I might have done something to bring that about. I just want to understand why we're not working together better. So he was nervous about doing this. He didn't feel close to her, he didn't feel very safe with it, but he said, I get that this is my job. And he went and he said that to her. And she looked at him for a minute and she said, why should I believe in your medicine when you don't believe in mine? And he said, I'm sorry, what? I don't believe in yours? And she said, you remember when I told you about my experience of being healed in church and how much that meant to me? And he said, yeah, I remember a little about that. And she said, you just looked angry and skeptical, and you didn't ask me a question about it or take it seriously at all, and you went straight on to prescribe this medicine. You just overrode it. And then you want me to take your medicine as valuable and worthwhile when you're deriding mine. And he said, to his credit, he said, wow, I had no idea I hurt you that way. I'm really sorry. She said, "Do you remember it?" He said, "Yes, I do, and I know that I don't have any experience with that, and I don't think I had any way of understanding it. And you're right, I didn't spend 2 minutes on it." And she said, "Never too late." He said, "Okay, tell me how you got healed at church." And they got back on a much better track. So when there is dishonesty built in, you have to address it. You have to find a way to address it. You have to find a way to deal with it directly. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Does that make sense to people? Do you know what I'm getting at there? This is a big one for docs, because when docs run into cultural differences, very often all they know to do is to bear down and try to break through. I've got to get you to do this. You've got to see the importance of that. And they forget that cultural variables, national, regional, ethnic, racial, even age differences. Culture, in Charlottesville, we have a sort of sophisticated small city surrounded by, as I think you guys do too, surrounded by a lot of rural places with very strong cultures, very powerful cultural events, where docs often just try to steer around and get past, get away from those cultural events. Those are deeply wired into people. Strategy doesn't beat culture. Culture, people get from the ground up. One of my favorite examples was a guy who was very overweight and had a lot of problems, and really needed to lose weight, and they'd been over it a bunch of times. Nothing ever seemed to change, etc. And the doctor said to them, the doc said, Doctor and I conferred, and I said, "You're up against something really strong here. Find out what it is." And so he said to the guy, "I can tell that it's really hard for you. We've talked about a lot of times. You've agreed with the idea a bunch of times, but nothing ever happens." And he said, "Well, Doc, Mama's way of saying that she loves me is cooking for me, and my way of saying I love her back is eating it." And he said, "So really, if you talk about cutting way back on how you eat and so forth, you're going to be pushing your mama away?" He said, "That's what it looks like to me, Doc." And was clearly saying, you know, this has ramifications far beyond anything I can understand or care about that has to do with sodium intake or, thank you. Total brain melt there, forgive me. Yeah, but anything to do with scientific variables, he's just looking at, does Mama love me? Do I love Mama? And the idea that we're going to talk him out of that by talking about pancreatic function or dangers to your feet of diabetes or whatever is not right. So to be respectful of those, not to just give in, but to be respectful of them and to realize this is huge and I am not in a position to just push it aside is very, very helpful. In the same vein, in much the same vein, this has to do with the idea that very often when you get pushback on things, when somebody says they won't do something, very often it is because they can't. People have a hard time admitting they can't. People don't like to say, "I'm not smart enough," or "I don't understand it," or I can't read. They find ways around that. "That's a bunch of crap. I never did believe in that crap." And very often that means I don't understand it, I can't make sense of it, I'm out of my depth, but that's much harder to say. What links it to the idea of culture and strategy is nobody is trying to be a jerk. We see people that look like they're trying to be jerks because they act like jerks. We give them good advice and they wave it off, or they argue with us, or they say, "Yeah, it's a great idea, Doc," and they don't do anything. So it looks like they're just being irresponsible or whatever. But if you think this way, I learned this particularly with kids, because kids, in their shame about their inability to keep up, kids are particularly ripe for this. And very often I would be brought, and when I was working with kids a lot, I would be brought a kid who was, held up as an example of resistance or oppositional defiant disorder, one of my least favorite DSM categories. Usually just means he's mad about something, but we give it a big fancy label. I would be brought those kids. Why is he so angry? Why is he fighting back on everything? And a lot of it was he didn't understand what was going on. He didn't understand. So when somebody says, I won't, the first question you ask yourself should be, okay, if you wanted to, could you? Do you know how to do this? Is this in your skill set? Don't just push harder. That's the bottom line of that. Don't look for the reason behind it, so that you're not just trying to mow somebody down. It should never be you against the patient. It should be the patient against himself. Again, a little bit in the same vein, another version of the same idea, where if you get into the situation where you are saying you've got to lose weight and he's saying I can't lose weight, you've got to, I can't, you got to stop smoking, Charlie. How many times have I told you about smoking? You know how much danger it's doing. Your lung cancer runs in your family, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, doc, well, you have no idea how hard it is. When it gets to be you against them, there will be no winner. He doesn't win by stymieing you and keeping on smoking and just keeping on or not losing weight. You don't win by pounding him and making him feel bad about it. I know I should stop, but I just can't stop. Life's so hard. There is no winner there. The winner can come if you can help him look at both sides and see. You got. I try to help residents learn to put it in those terms. You have a big problem here, Charlie, and I want to help you look at it. On the one hand, you want to get better. I know you do. You come to see me regularly. You try some things. You don't want to be sick. You don't want to be messed up. On the other hand, it's you really can't stop smoking, or it's really hard for you to stop smoking. You're in a battle with yourself here. We got to figure out how I can help you decide which way you're going to go. I wouldn't even say decide to go my way. I would say decide how are you going to handle this? How are you going to get out of this? Because if you can help it be that way, if you can help him see it as a battle against himself and fight it and let you into it. Yeah, you're right, Doc. It's terrible. I feel terrible every time I come here and you ask me about the smoking and I have to say, no, it's still 2 packs a day. I feel like a crumb bum. I feel like a jerk. You must dread seeing me. You must think I'm an idiot. Because I know I let you down so badly. I would want to say, it's not me you're letting down, Charlie. It's not me you're letting down. It's yourself. You want to stop and it's really hard, and that's a legitimate problem. That's not about you being a bad guy or me being a bad doc, because I can't make it happen. We really want to be on the team with them, supporting them, encouraging them, and it's not easy, but it's really important. I'm going to just jump over this one to get to the money slide at the end here. This is pretty self-apparent. We tend to use reassurance to avoid difficult encounters. Don't. Reassurance is very valuable when it's done well. But good reassurance requires that you know what somebody's anxious about. You got to be tuned into what the problem is in order to be able to be reassuring in a real way. If you reassure dishonestly or prematurely or incorrectly, you don't just not help, you hurt, because you say to the patient, I'm going through a thing here, I'm going through a ritual of mine, I'm going through a process I believe in. That doesn't really help. So here's the last one that I think is really, really important. Do not be afraid to love your patients or to let them love you. One of the things that I watched for years with residents, and I watch it with I teach a lot of psychotherapy trainees, and I noticed that time and again, docs of all stripes work very hard to be in a relationship in a healthy way, be helpful, reach out, support, encourage, etc. And then when it works and when they're generating something really positive and the patient says something on the order of, you are really a great doc, you're really helping me, thank you so much for that, that really made a difference, I really understand that. They say, it's all in a day's work, Ethel, nothing to it, or you did the work, I didn't do anything, you made the changes. They don't know how to take that next step. Nothing is more destructive of a good relationship than affection or appreciation that is put aside. If people say, thank you, doc, you really did a great job, you want to be able to say, thank you very much. That makes me feel really good. because I really try to do a good job for you. I care a lot about how things turn out for you. I'm doing my best, and if it's working, that feels great to me. And maybe, if it's real, if it's honest, to go on to say some version of, and I enjoy working with you also. You're rewarding, you're a great patient. I think we're a good team. But direct or indirect, we often take our carefully built triumphs and connections and good job and kind of push it away and undermine it instead of appreciating it and enjoying it and giving it back. So that process, the fear of I don't want to get too close, I don't want to feel like they're depending on me, I don't want to be grandiose about, yes, aren't I a good doctor? No, please be grandiose about that if you are. Okay? If you've done a good job for somebody, own it, enjoy it. Say, that felt great to me too. That was really good. I came up with the right treatment and you did your part and we really knocked that puppy out of the park. That's what it's supposed to be like. Let's keep that going. People underdo that dramatically when we're shy and awkward about accepting that. So in that spirit, let me say how much I've enjoyed being here. It's been wonderful to be in Louisville. I've never been here before. Eli Pendleton in Family Medicine, who invited me, has given me a great tour and makes me want to live here. This could be problematical when I get home, but we'll talk. But it's a great town. Looks like there's a lot of fun, very interesting things going on. It's been a lot of fun to be with the family medicine residents. Great honor to talk to you folks today. And I appreciate very much your investment and involvement and hearing what I have to say. Thanks a lot. If anybody has questions, you're free to ask them or to come down front and ask them personally.